Welcome to Surrender School.
To that, consider being a volunteer. We always need volunteers to admit people from the waiting room, everything from that to lead the breakout rooms. We always could use somebody who has experience in video editing. Joy does the video editing right now. I think she has Lori do it with her too, or someone. But anyway, so Joy does the video editing, which means that she has a lot on her plate. I'll just say that. So anyway, if you have that in your background, please consider volunteering to do that. It would be great. All right. If Surrender School has helped you in your recovery, please donate. There is a donate button on the front page of, guess what, surrenderschool.org. All right. All right. Also, join the WhatsApp group. I was supposed to put a QR code there, an accurate one. Would have been awesome. Anyway, sorry, it's not there. Anyway, but you can, there'll be a link that will be put in the chat to join the Surrender School WhatsApp group. So please feel free to do that. A lot of conversation goes on out there, which is pretty cool. I also suggest that you sign up at EnneagramInstitute.com, which, by the way, doesn't have a space in it. That's a typo from me. EnneagramInstitute.com. You can sign up for 2 Ennea Thoughts. So something for your type to think about that day. It's very helpful. So you might do like the type you are, and maybe one of your wings, or the type you are and your spouse or daughter or something, just, or a best friend or something like that. Kind of fun. All right. We're going to go ahead and get started. Let's take a moment to feel your breath going in and out of your body and feel your feet on the floor. That's a really good way to be sure that you are present. Feel your feet on the floor and your breath going in and out. Let go of everything that happened this morning and anything that's going to happen this afternoon. All right, together, let's go ahead and do the simple set-aside prayer. God, help me to set aside everything I think I know to leave space for what I have yet to learn. All right, the goal of this course is just a personal journey. Our focus is to help you understand the relationship between your false self and your true self, and treat yourself with unrelenting compassion because you are human. Some things to keep in mind. This is the whole thing all year is working the steps by type. So we work each step by your specific Enneagram type, and therefore it makes complete sense for you to know what your type is. Otherwise, this is you become an observer as opposed to a participant, and you will grow by being a participant. I can promise you the growth is amazing if you are a participant rather than an observer. All right, I believe very strongly that self-contempt stops spiritual growth, which is one of the reasons I continually talk about the difference between working the steps and thinking you can hate yourself to recovery, and working the steps while you love yourself. If you can work the steps while loving yourself, your spiritual growth will just be absolutely amazing. For me, the Enneagram allowed me to do that. The more I worked the steps before I learned the Enneagram, every time I worked them, I felt like I went deeper into self-contempt. And it's as if my higher power said, if you hate yourself, you can't grow. You just can't, because you're so busy. You spent so much energy hating yourself. So anybody who somewhere deep inside believes if you can hate yourself enough, you'll be better, that's bullshit. It's not true at all. Just letting you know. All right. We believe if you do the work of this, you will be supercharged. Your recovery will be supercharged. What that looks like for the coming years, who knows? But it'll be an adventure for sure. All right. Another reminder is any of the shares and any of the comments you make, be kind. Be kind to yourself and be kind to other people. Of all the things you can be in the world, be kind. All right. So our plan here is in the main room, we share a little bit. We'll have a few minutes here to share. I cover a little bit of information. Today, it's going to be a little bit more than usual. And then we randomly assign you to rooms for sharing on the question. And when you get to the rooms, the way that the leaders have been asked to do this, I'll cover it in detail in a little while, is that you have to read the question of your type, and then you basically can share on what your answer to that question is. But we start each share with the question, and that keeps the breakout rooms very focused, and it's working really nicely to have the breakout rooms focused. The reason that we do that, by the way, is if we don't do that, what happens is people share on anything, and if this is a year long, by the end, we'll have 3 people left because everybody else will be, I'm out of here, right? So we don't want that. So if the breakout rooms are very focused on the questions, and that way you get to hear the other type questions, it's pretty cool to do that. Okay. And then we come back at the end. All right. So what I want to talk about, most of our questions this week dealt with patterns, the unmanageable patterns that emerge because basically that egoic self, that ego structure jumps up in front of us without our permission and kind of takes over whatever the situation is. And that's that pattern that we see throughout our lives. That pattern also ties back then to our passion, and the passion for the types, if you remember, the passion is what has caused most of our suffering. And it's these patterns that have caused this suffering. We don't even know it, by the way, until we come to program, right? So, and that's the reason I have this. Inquiry just means questions. So we ask these questions because what we want to do is expose those patterns. We want to see the patterns because then we can dissipate the patterns, or our higher power can. Okay. So this is all of the different types with all of the different little icons. And I am going to ask, this is going to be like 2 or 3 people sharing because I have a lot to cover here. Were any patterns of yours made visible this week? That's what the sharing is on this time around. Were any patterns made visible this week when you were answering your question?
I noticed a pattern of the exact question that we covered. Like I want to like default to, how can I say this? The fawning in a way, like as a response to not wanting to be rejected. So I want to people please. That's my pattern. I have this deep, deep, deep desire to be wanted and loved, and I give my power away.
Such a 2 thing, isn't it? I mean, and what happens is we don't really see it because it feels like a natural way to be. So I want to cover again something, and I haven't talked about this much, but I do want to say part of the problem in that, and I did cover this a bit last week, and certainly it's in videos if you look at the videos. It's like from the time that we're born, our ego structure starts building to defend us. It defends us against life. It defends us against scary things and all of that. And the ego structure builds up and can become so strong. That's not the problem. It can be strong. The problem is we believe that is us. We believe that ego structure is us. So I believe that I'm an 8, so I got in people's face. And I believe that person is me. And then I spent all this time hating myself because seriously, that's me. And then I learned with the Enneagram, no, that's your ego structure. I don't think the ego's evil. I think it really believes it's protecting me. I just don't need it now. I'm not a child anymore. I'm an adult. So I get to drop that down. And Jasmine, tied to what you said, what happens is once I realize that, I can go, oh, I see what's happening here. That behavior is protecting me because I have this need, in your case, I have this need to feel wanted and loved. And that is what comes to the forefront. So as I ask my higher power and we work these steps, our higher power, our greater power will dissipate that. Will it go away? No, of course it'll always be there, but it'll dissipate it because then the true self comes out. And that's what we're seeking, right? So thank you so much for sharing that.
I just have been getting so clear on, I'm a 6. And so safety, certainty, security, all of those things are paramount. And one of my major patterns is I use food to feel safe. I mean, food, I use that. My pattern is things feel out of control. And I automatically move toward food in order to feel more in control and safer. And that's really not what food is for, but that pattern of trying to go after and use it for the purpose of feeling safe, I'm really seeing that. So thanks.
I ditto with Linda. So I find that at night at 10 o'clock, I'm sitting in front of the TV and I'm like so woozy. And then I say to myself, just go up to bed. And then I go up to bed and it feels like coming at me. It's a habit, a strong habit, is all the unfinished, like all the times during the day, I didn't get the admiration I wanted, the appreciation. I feel alone and lonely. My 2 is just like really coming out like onto a stage and all the unfinished stuff of the day, and I feel like much more awake. And then I run to food to feel safe and trust and kind of like to the pattern is kind of to push it away, like to train myself away from the feelings.
This is the warning that Bill W. gives about not going into morbid reflection. That's exactly what he's talking about, is this rehearsing what I did wrong during the day. And that is a discipline to rehearse what I did right during the day, the growth that I had during the day. And I mean, that is absolutely a practice. Later on, I'm including not just the challenges that we had last year, but I'm also including some of the recommendations by Michael Naylor in his Alchemy book. And some of those very specifically are for a practice like that. How do I practice that? Because it's much harder to say, I'm not going to think like that. What do you think about, right? So if you can include a practice, this is not like I'm a Zen person who includes practices. I'm not saying that at all. Anybody who knows me, like, yeah, whatever. Anyway, but I love the idea of that. So
Thanks, Cheryl. Funny you should ask that question, because that's all I saw this week was, this pattern of using pain to feel safe as a type 4. And I woke up in the middle of the night in real, I mean, it was excruciating pain. And then I was trying to figure out where it was in my body, and it wasn't in my body. It was sort of like the description of people that talk about cutting off a limb and then feeling the pain in that limb, in what's not there anymore. And I could visualize this cocoon in the middle of like this big universe. There was this cocoon that was kind of brownish, and it was just so painful. It was just so painful. And then I saw, in the questions that I was answering, this being setting myself apart on the basis of my suffering, and how, that holding on to those intense feelings as safety, and what perplexity, how bizarre that anyone can look at pain as something to feel safe in, and then that helped me work through in my addiction, my love addiction. It helped me very much to see how the patterns in all my relationships, in which there is no reality in that suffering. It's just probably just me wanting to be in that cocoon. So funny you should ask that, because the patterns were just jumping every day, were just jumping, and I could see them.
And
Yeah.
Thank news is awareness comes first. So there's absolutely nothing that can change until we're aware of it. So it's awareness, and then acceptance of that, and then action, right? I think that comes from Al-Anon, but that's kind of the sequence of those things happen in. And I can't wait for you to share in the breakout rooms, because I know that you'll go deeper even than this, and I think that's wonderful. Because once we start seeing that, by the way, I don't know if this is good or bad news. Once you see it, you can't unsee it. So yay, score. But we'll see what happens there. All right, thank you, Vera. Selma, to you.
I'm a 4, and I'm constantly caught up in envy, and envy, and not being able to take action. So maybe that intensifies my emotion, because it's a vicious cycle of, I envy that my brother and my sister have both re-landscaped their yards. It was a goal of mine before they even bought their house. I still haven't done mine. I see theirs. I'm so envious. I feel paralyzed, like I'm never going to be able to, fire the bullet. And then I get depressed and feel hopeless. And it's just a vicious cycle. And I mean, it's so, I could go on and on with the envy. So last night I said, when I recognized I was doing it, you realize this is your 4, this is what you do, but it feels so real that it's hard to go beyond that. I can recognize, oh yeah, not everybody does this. Not everybody thinks their whole life would be miraculously changed if only they could fill in the blank, like so and so and so. And so I just really get stuck in that. So it's both the envy, which leads to the intense feelings and despair, and then I'm stuck. So,
Thank you. Yeah, you're in the right place, right? It will take us the year, but
okay, all
you're in
right,
absolutely the right place. Thank you.
okay,
Thank you so
all
much.
right, thanks. Yeah.
Thank you.
Like a book almost. But I'm trying to think about the fear, because you say, like, what is the fear? There's always a fear underneath it. And the fear for me is the abandonment, because anytime I said no, being a 2, people would cut me out. And I'm thinking, like, what's harder for me now? To set boundaries and then dealing with those feelings, or the resentment? Because then I have resentment at the person, and then I have resentment at myself for not setting a boundary, if that makes sense. So I turn to the food, like, it's like almost either way, like, what the heck do I do now? I'm going to say no, and that fear is going to come up that I'm going to get cut off, and, abandonment from childhood. So,
So I'm going to say kind of the reason I don't sponsor anymore, because people get sick of hearing this sentence. Those are stories you're telling yourself. Those are stories you're telling yourself. And I think that's what you need to look at. Teresa, it's okay. It's not a problem. We all tell ourselves stories. That's what we do. It's how it's human. It is absolutely human nature. But somewhere in the mix of that, write that question. What's the story I'm telling myself on this? Right. So, and even though I say it strongly, I'm not saying it strongly to you. That's the reason I don't sponsor it. But at least consider that this is possible. Some part of that is a story you're telling yourself. That is not even reality. I don't know. Maybe it is reality, but maybe it's not. Just consider. Okay, thank you.
And Jerry, I appreciate you. What I realized this week is, because I also am trying to find my type, and I realized type 4 probably is what I am, and fantasy is the thing that caught my eye when I was reading about type 4. And I noticed this week, every book that I hear is helpful for me, from what you suggest, or the other programs I have, I buy them, and I have the fantasy. If I have the book, I will have the recovery. Even I don't read them. I just buy those books. Every book you name, I bought them. I took a screenshot. I got it from Amazon. They're piling up books from what you suggest. And then when I don't get to that recovery that I'm hoping for, because I bought those books and I don't even read them, I become disappointed with myself. And then I go to food.
Yep, I hear you. I do that with exercise equipment too. Apparently buying exercise equipment is not the same thing as doing the workouts.
And by the way, it's not only book, clothes, shoes.
Yep.
All of those, I feel like, oh, I have them. I'm going to have a dream life.
Yeah. Well, welcome to the human race. That's such a human thing. It is just a human thing. So thank you, Alan.
Yeah. And I connect that to 4.
Yeah, probably. Yeah, absolutely.
I'm just so much more aware of my tendency to compliment, which is a strength, but it can also be a habit of ingratiating. It's a way of distancing myself. There's just so many things I've become more aware of. And I've been in Al-Anon for well over a decade. So for me, being a type 2, Al-Anon has been a great resource, but Enneagram brings it to a different level, where I get to have more compassion in the awareness that I'm having. A small thing that happened with my son, he was bummed out that he had jury duty, and he goes into this really dark place. He's a big worrier, and I just I mean, I've been doing some of this work for years, but it's just good to keep being aware of it, that I think I have to fix that somehow, and I don't. And in fact, the biggest thing I think I got this week was about the rejection, is how people of type 2 actually cause their own rejection because they're so busy either needing so much and not being aware of it and expecting that emotional intensity, which is a strength and being intuitive, but by trying to rescue people, it is so harmful. And I just feel like I have had a greater awareness, which I've had for some time, but it was stronger this week. And just so grateful. And I just love the piece of that compassion plays with that. And because shame is something that I learned early on that is the dominant emotion of choose. So, and that was the first aha of Enneagrams for me. And I've from there's been a lot that has come from that. So thank you.
Thank you, Robin. And Teresa, I want to return to you with another comment here. Because I sounded mean, and I didn't mean to sound mean about the story you're telling yourself. But I do think when all is said and done, what happens is anytime we are longing to change, and so our greater power will help us change. And then when we change, everybody around us is like, what the fuck just happened here? She always steps up. She always. And so some of it, even though you may be taking it as rejection, it may only be that they don't know what to do with that because you're acting differently. You know what I'm saying? So that's what I meant by it's a story you're telling yourself, not some horrible story you're telling yourself, just that you will interpret people's actions differently than maybe they actually mean, right? We're studying that emotional sobriety book, and he goes in everything. It's not personal. It's not personal. I mean, nothing is personal. It's not personal. It's them, not you, right? So yeah, anyway, so I recommend everybody read this book, Emotional Sobriety. The 12 Essential Insights for Emotional Sobriety by Ellen Berger. It's an amazing book. It is what we are reading at the 8 a.m. Tuesday and Wednesday book study, or reading room, I mean, and it's awesome. Anyway, okay, everybody ready to move on?
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you for clarifying that, because I was sitting here in my head thinking, like, what story am I telling myself? I got a little like confused. Thank you. Thank you for that.
You're welcome, Teresa. All right, let me share my screen again. I think everybody's sitting here going, "Woo, I'm glad she wasn't my sponsor." Okay, all right. So let's go ahead and go through this. All right, so everybody knows these little guys, these little icons, and I use the icons because wherever you see the icon, so usually you zone in on your icon, wherever you see that icon, you know this is about your type. That's the reason we use icons. Our brains work in icons, so it makes sense to utilize them. All right. So I want everybody to grab your printed fill-in sheets. If you did not print out your fill-in sheets, you're probably not going to be able to get much out of what I cover in the next half an hour. However, there is a lot of information. I'll tell you exactly what video it's in and that kind of stuff so that you can find it easily. But let me explain what I'm going to do for this next half an hour. So probably about half an hour. So if you will, everybody grab your sheet. If you don't have it, it's okay. Please don't ask me to slow down because I'm not going to. But what I will do is refer you to where you can go to get the information. Plus, I will stay on after the session if you want to just kind of jot the information down. But I'm going to cover the sheets very quickly. I need to point out, the purpose is not for you to learn the Enneagram today. The purpose is for you to fill in the sheet. I'm not going to give you time to think about it. I'm not going to go into detail. The detail is next week. You'll have a fill-in sheet, and then I'm going to cover the sheet with you. But right now, I want you to fill it in just so that it's your handwriting that's there. There is something magical about hearing your voice. You say it and you hear it. And there's something magical about something in your own handwriting. So that's why we're doing this. All right. So let me explain real quick. This is a 30,000-foot view. The Enneagram, as you can tell, has the 9 types. To the side of any number are called wings. So the 9 has an 8 wing and a 1 wing. Does that make sense? The 8 has a 9 wing and a 7 wing and so forth, right? The arrows, you can see there's a diagram in the center, and those are arrows to the different types. So I'm going to talk about type 8, which is what I am. You notice the 8 has an arrow to the 2, and it also has an arrow to the 5. We aren't going to talk about forward arrows and back arrows until way later in the year. So right now, just know that what I'm talking about are what are your wings and what are your arrows. That's what I'm going to cover. Now, I'm going to tell you why that matters. As we go through the 12 steps, this has nothing to do with Enneagram for a second. As we go through the 12 steps, we will begin and our ego structure automatically starts to dissipate a bit. The ego is no longer in charge. That's why they call the ego edging God out and doing all of this. So your ego structure is fully in place. We come on our knees to program. Nobody comes like, I think on Saturday, I'm just going to try something fun. Nobody comes to program like that at all. We come on our knees and we are desperate to be free of this. That's how we come, right? That's that, please God, help me. That's how we come. Okay, from that moment on, what happens is that ego structure begins to dissipate. And as the ego structure begins to dissipate, something has to fill it in because nature abhors a vacuum. And what will happen automatically is you will begin including the traits of your wings and of your arrows. You don't even know you're doing it. There's not a language for it yet, but that's what's happening. You will begin to include those traits. That's why now, if you've been in program for 10, 20, 30 years, you have incorporated so many of those traits that you don't even recognize. It's not as clear that I am this type as it would be if you took the test in your 20s, right? So that's why. So what I want to cover is what on the wings and the arrows, what are I call it the gift of the spirit of each of those. Each of them have a passion, which causes most of their suffering. And each of them, all of us, have a gift of the spirit that basically God has given us for that type. Okay, now, real quick, I want to say for the 8, and there's a lot of different words that I'll use, but in this particular case, I want to talk about how the gift of the spirit of the 8. I used to try to be strong and courageous. I mean, I went through my life trying to be strong and courageous. When I came to the Enneagram, I realized I don't have to try to be strong and courageous. I am strong and courageous. So that allows me to relax into that as opposed to striving to be something. Okay, it is really easy to relax into the gifts of the spirit of the wings and the arrows because we have no basic fear against it. So we can incorporate those so easily. That's why I'm going to give you what those are, and then I just want you to relax about it. Don't sweat it at all. Next week when we cover it, in the coming weeks, we'll cover the wings and arrows. Then you'll already be accustomed to that word, and it'll be written in your hand, which is kind of cool. Okay, everybody good? We're going to move on. Feel free, by the way, when you see the icon, even though let's say you're a type, I'm going to start with type 1, but let's say that you're a type 9 and you know that the 1 is one of your wings. The minute you see the icon, you can write the word there. That'll help everything go a little faster, if that makes sense. Okay. I am going to cover the wings for each of the types. I'm going to cover the arrows for each of the types. And then specifically to that type, I'm going to cover the passion and then this idea of striving to whatever. The thing that and also the mantra. And I want to talk about for a second, I covered these sheets in detail in the video for session 3 under the EEE 12-step on surrenderschool.org. So if you go to surrenderschool.org and go up to everything we offer and choose past shit, I don't think it says past shit, but you know what I'm saying? The stuff from the past. Joy, can you change that to past shit? I'm kidding. Anyway, and you drop down to the past stuff. Then you can go and find session 3 video. It'll say session 3 video. Click on that and it walks you through all of these. Okay, so that's why I know I can go fast here because it's on video if you want it, or you can stay after the session's over and we can cover it there. Okay, type 1. So first of all, I'm going to start with the gift of the spirit for the merciful teacher, type 1. This beaver is serenity. If you have that beaver anywhere on your fill-in sheet, put the word serenity where it says gift of the spirit. All right, let's talk about the type 1's wings. It has a 9 wing. The gift of the spirit for the gentle mystic for the 9 is right action. If you have the little sloth anywhere on your sheet, you can write right action underneath it. Okay, on the right is this cute little cartoon dog who is my dog, Mayhem, called the intuitive healer. The gift of the spirit for the 2 is humility. If you have the picture of the little otters anywhere on your sheet? That's type 7. The gift of the spirit for the 7 is persistence in the mundane. For the creative alchemist, the little tiger, if you have the little tiger cub anywhere, the gift of the spirit is emotional stability. Now, I want to talk about, when we talk about the passion is what causes our suffering, I'm going to talk about the 4 for a second. This is what is so cool about this. The gift of the spirit is when you are in your true self, this is what you are like. So we've heard from 4s today, and 4s talk about the suffering, the pain that they feel. They talk about the emotional pain that they feel. They talk about feeling envious of other people, this kind of suffering. Imagine as you relax into your true self for the 4, they become emotionally stable. They're emotionally stable. That is what we have to look forward to. The 1s are serene. The 2s are humble, right? The 9s take right action. The 7s can be persistent in, even if they're bored, they can stick with it, right? This is great. Okay, so at the bottom, the passion or defect, we call it defect in the 12 and 12, in the 12 steps, is anger, usually at self and repressed. The virtue or gift of the spirit is serenity, being serene. The mantra for the 1 is, it isn't always my responsibility. We've heard that many times already. And they are striving to feel perfect by avoiding criticism, avoiding rule breaking, and avoiding illogical behavior. Everybody good? All right, so that is the 1. All right, the 2. Once again, the 2, if you have a little dog there, right, it is humility. If you see the beaver anywhere, serenity, that's the wing for the 2, is the 1. The other wing for the 2 is the 3, and that is the self-honesty. This is the first time we've seen the 3. So the gift of the spirit of the 3 is being honest with himself, self-honesty. All right. The 8, the arrows, if you look at this thing, the 2 has an arrow to the 8, and the 8 gift of the spirit is innocence. And the arrow, once again, to the 4, which is emotional stability. All right. For the type 2, their passion is pride. So for 2s, do you see how that feels like a blind? Doesn't that feel like what? That's a blind spot. That's a blind spot. I love it because, and 2s, it's so very clear because they're like, pride, what are you talking about? Right? Anyway, and then humility is the other end of that spectrum, if you will. Okay. The mantra, ask for what you need and ask again, for the best love comes from a full well. And then they are striving to feel connected by they avoid their own needs. They avoid being alone, and they avoid not being needed. They like to be needed. Everybody good with the 2? All right. And I know this is going fast. I apologize for that, but we have 9 things to cover. Okay. Once again, the type 3, the inspiring champion, the gift of the spirit for the inspiring champion is self-honesty. They have a 2 wing of humility is the gift of the spirit for that. And the 4 wing, emotional stability for little tiger. And this is the first time we've seen the 6. The 6 is the courageous pathfinder, and their gift of the spirit is walking through fear. 6s will always feel fear, but they will walk through the fear when they have the gift of the spirit. Because it's like they can put fear in its proper place, which is pretty cool. And then also the 9, the other arrow is to the 9. And the 3, 6, and 9 are the triangle in the center. You see the triangle in the center here? Okay. All right. And then for the sloth is right action. The passion or defect of the 3 is deceit. It's usually self-deceit. They lie to themselves. And their virtue is veracity, which means self-honesty. Their mantra is, to get to truth, I must be informed by my feelings, because 3s usually try to avoid feeling. And then they are striving to feel outstanding by avoiding failure. They avoid emotions, and they avoid inefficiency. All right. Now we can move on to the next one. So this is the 4. And once again, the 4 is the creative alchemist. The gift of the spirit is emotional stability. They have a 3 wing, and the 3 has an unshakable foundation in their life. We talked about self-honesty there also. Okay. And that self-honesty gives them this unshakable foundation. All right. And then 5, this is the first time we've seen the 5. The 4 has a 5 wing, and their gift of the spirit is non-attachment. They're observers by nature, so they're really good at non-attachment. They also have an arrow to the 1, which gives them serenity. They also have an arrow to the 2, which gives them humility. Their passion or defect is envy, and it's just like Selma was talking about earlier, right? This, I mean, that's a living example of that passion at work, right? The cool part is on that continuum that starts the passion on one end and the virtue on the other. As you move along that continuum through awareness, acceptance, and action, becomes the virtue. And equanimity basically means understanding that we are all one. I'm really bad at describing that, but that's really that feeling that that conquers envy because we are all one. That's, I guess, the best I can do at this moment in time. I'll go into more detail later. Okay, I have everything I need in this moment to grow is the mantra, and they are striving to feel unique by avoiding insignificance. They also avoid or can avoid conforming and also avoid small talk. I think 4s are hilarious because they really, really, really avoid small talk. I avoid small talk too, but they're like masters at it. Okay, let's go to the 5. So the 5, once again, the gift of the spirit is non-attachment. They have a 4 wing, so that means that they can access emotional stability. They have a 6 wing, which means they can access walking through fear. They have an arrow, which means they can access innocence. They have an arrow to the 8, and they have an arrow to the 7, which means they can also access persistence in the mundane. So hanging in there even if they're bored. Their passion or defect is greed, and it's usually a greed for knowledge. Their virtue or gift of the spirit is, once again, non-attachment. The mantra is making contact with my direct experience, and feelings will bring a greater clarity and knowing. They're really into clarity and knowing. And what this teaches them is that if they will, instead of observing, if they will experience and feel, that they will have greater clarity and knowing. Okay, striving to feel sufficient they avoid emotional reactions, they avoid crowds, and they avoid not knowing the answer. They like to be the answer person. Okay, here is the 6. The 6, last time it had a little bunny in a hand. I just love this meerkat. I think it's perfect for the 6. The gift of the spirit for the courageous pathfinder, I say walk through fear, is courage. Right? Their ability to walk through fear, to really have the courage. Because once again, courage isn't the absence of fear, it's walking through the fear, right? So anyway, so courage is the word that usually shows up. Okay. They have an arrow, they have a wing, a 5 wing, which means that non-attachment. I put easy does it here, but it's basically non-attachment. And then also the gift of the spirit for the 7, they have a 7 wing, persistence in the mundane. They have an arrow to the 9. Once again, they're part of that triangle. Which is the gift of the spirit for that is right action, and an arrow to the 3, and the gift of the spirit of that is that is self-honesty and that unshakable foundation that they get from self-honesty. Their passion for the 6 is fear. Their virtue is courage. The mantra is faith is believing in things unseen. I am guided within. They are striving to feel secured they avoid being told what to do. They avoid not being prepared, and they avoid self-doubt. Okay, the 7. Once again, the 7, the persistence in the mundane, to be able to hang out, even if it's boring or not exciting, or whatever the word is that 7s go for. All right, they have a wing to the 6, which is the ability then to walk through fear. They have a wing to the 8, which is innocence. They have an arrow to the 5, non-attachment. They have an arrow to the 1, serenity. Their passion is gluttony, and it's not necessarily food, but it's basically experience. They want the next experience, next and next, more, carpe diem. And their virtue is temperance, to understand that there is such a thing as enough. I love this mantra for the 7. Focus and staying present are my holy work. I am enough. Whenever I want to ask my greater power to help me change something, I ask him to let me make this my holy work. I just love this. It's like, if this becomes my holy work, it means I put it as a priority as opposed to something I wish that I would do at some point in my life. So I love this. Focus and staying present are my holy work. Okay. They are striving to feel satisfied by, they avoid negative emotions, they avoid rules, and they avoid lack of options. They're the one that they like to, absolutely love to be spontaneous. They make very fun friends. Unless you hate being spontaneous, then they're not fun friends. I guess it all depends. They're fun friends for me, but I have a 7 wing, so okay. All right, to the 8. I am an 8, so I completely get this. The gift of the spirit of the 8 is innocence. They have a 7 wing, so they can persist in the mundane. I have a quick story to tell here. I used to travel the world for about a decade. I traveled 170,000 miles a year on planes. And so I would watch on these big long flights to South Africa or something. I would watch a movie first with no sound. And if it held up, I'd watch it again with sound. Right. So that is persistence in the mundane. I didn't realize I was incorporating my 7 wing, but I was the gift of the spirit of the 7, but I was. Okay. So also the 9 is the other wing, and that is right action. They have an arrow to the 2, the gift of humility, an arrow to the 5, non-attachment. The passion is a lust for intensity, and the virtue is innocence. The mantra for the 8 is, in my vulnerability lies my strength. They strive to feel powerful, but I basically avoid being indirect, avoid waiting, and avoid being controlled. Okay, we have 1 more to go. All right, here's the type 9. The gift of the spirit for the 9 is right action. The lion-hearted protector, I'm sorry, they have a wing of the 8, which gives them innocence. They have a wing of the 1, which is self-compassion. Serenity is the word, the main word that I use there usually. And then for the 3, they have an arrow to the 3, which basically is self-honesty, which gives them an unshakable foundation because they're honest with themselves. They also have the arrow to the 6, which is walking through fear, once again, as part of that triangle. Their passion is sloth, which just means delays action, right? And then their virtue is right action. The mantra for the 9 is resolve small things before they become big things. Although it's really interesting because many of the 9s change this to other things like my presence matter, do what gives you joy, like things like that got them moving in a direction because their flavor, I'll say that, their flavor of delaying was different than each other. I love the fact that that they did that as they got to know themselves better. Okay, they feel at peace by avoiding directness, avoiding conflict, and avoiding making decisions. All right, so that is it. We are ready to go to the breakout room. So I want to cover real quick what we do in the breakout room so everybody feels very comfortable. For every share, you read your question first. There's going to be your breakout room leader. If you're not the leader, hang out a minute. I don't know if you send leaders first or last, but anyway, so there's somebody who'll step up and say, I'm the leader of the breakout room. So they will interrupt you if you just start to share on random stuff, because their job is to make sure that you read the question. There's 2 reasons for that. One is the discipline of reading a question, right? And always write your question at the top of the page, read the question, and so forth. But the main thing is, if we stay focused on reading the questions and answering the questions in the group, first of all, everybody will hang out till the end of the year. And then the other thing is, other people didn't read your question. These are by type. So if there's all these different types in the room, they didn't read type 2's questions. So you read the questions so they know what question you're answering, because each type has a different question. All right. So anyway, this is not an opportunity to determine your type. That's a solo exercise, not a group activity. So please do not say, I don't know what my type is. No, read the question and then answer it. And I've heard great things that is exactly what's happening in breakout rooms, which makes me super happy. All right. So Joy, when you are ready, you can go ahead and send everybody into, I'll stop sharing here.
I have to say that in the beginning, I was very lost with this question because of that word patterns. And then you asked the question when we open up with patterns. And I guess I don't know what my patterns are yet because I just started with Enneagram. Is that what it is? I guess you can help me a little bit with that. I'm kind of lost with it. What do I need to read, or what do I need to do?
So let's talk about the typical pattern of the 9. Okay, so and to
Okay.
me, what's interesting is our patterns are in our blind spot. We don't see them. I mean, it's just not like they're not like right in front of us. They're just they almost never are. Now, that's not for the 8. They almost always are because I'm, in somebody's face and it's kind of obvious. But for the 9, so the pattern for the 9 is usually something like when conflict is in front of you, when a decision is in front of you, whatever, that the 9 will make a valid decision to delay their decision and feels like there's no harm in doing that. And sometimes there is no harm in doing that, but sometimes there is harm in doing that. And so 9s almost make an art form of checking out. They're very good at just checking out, sitting in front of a television for hours and hours and not even realizing that they have to go to the bathroom. They kind of check out. And that is tied, the basic fear of the 9 is that beyond this is nothingness. There's a fear of, and I used to say that it was destruction or something like that, but that's too active of a thing. So the 9s here have taught me from last year that the fear of the 9 is nothingness, right? And I'm using words that sound like I know what I'm talking about, and I don't, because I don't have the fear. I do have a 9 wing, and so I can incorporate the things of the 9, but I don't have the basic fear of the 9. And the basic fear of the 9 is that nothingness. And when something happens that they are facing that great fear, they will check out. They can check out right in the middle of a conversation. Here's what makes 9s interesting, because the basic emotion of the 9 is anger, but they don't even realize they're angry, right? 8s express their anger, and 9 could kind of hide their anger. 1's anger is there for them, but it's usually at themselves and it kind of seeps out the edges. But for 9s, they can go along to get along, and then finally explode because they've been stamping down that anger for so long. And they, instead of expressing any kind of anger, they will check out. I mean, so that's the main thing. The pattern usually for the 9 is this the willful checking out of whatever the situation is. And so they seem very 2-like, but their motivation is completely different. The 2s do things to be loved. That's all the actions they take is to feel loved. The 9 just wants to feel at peace. I will check out. I will watch Friends for the next 4 hours. Right? A bowl of popcorn in my love. All right. So that's
exactly. Yeah, I agree. Can I just share something that happened with anger? I have been noticing that pattern. So the other day, chatting with a friend, and something she said made me so angry. And I knew it. And so I came back and I just started writing about, okay, anger, I acknowledge you. Anger, I'm angry, those kind of things. I just started journaling that out. And then I just was not at peace. I felt the conflict within myself, not really know what to do with the anger. So I just spent some time meditating, praying. And so the next day, after our session yesterday, I just took a nap. And I actually felt relieved from the anger. And I was able to call my friend. But I think this amazing thing for me was I was able to express to her that I was angry about it, but not attack her. So that was amazing for me. I appreciate that. Thank you so much.
It is. Yeah, isn't that awesome? Growth. Love growth. Thank you, Francine, for sharing that. Dave, to you.
Hi, everybody. So I'm an 8, and my question was, how have I used food to feel more in control, and how has this approach led to unmanageable patterns? And my initial reaction to the question every week has been, I haven't done that, and so it doesn't apply. Well, if I really followed my first instinct, I wouldn't be doing much in this workshop. So I have to dig a little bit deeper and realize that's my defense mechanism, that's my denial, and there is something in there. And when I really looked at it, I really became aware of my deepest fear of being controlled, because I've used food to control my moods, control my energy level, and I've gotten pretty good at it. I've done that since I was a kid, and I didn't really realize that I wasn't controlling my food. My food was controlling me with that. And so what I said was, so I'm creating the very thing I fear the most, being controlled by a force that is not for my highest good. And that's really what any kind of addiction does to me, is the addiction is in control of me. I'm not in control of me, and I'm not in control of the addiction. So it's very interesting to me to see that where the question was about a pattern that has been a pattern for a really long time. And the fact that I was resistant to even answering the question really proves it. So thanks again, everybody, for showing up today.
Thanks, Dave. Yeah, and I'll tell you, this is what blind spots look like. It's just amazing to me. So I'm going to quote again, this one of my favorite quotes by Khalil Gibran. It's on page May 26th of the For Today for OA. The lust for comfort, that stealthy thing that enters the house a guest, becomes a host and then a master. And it's like, right, and to me, for me, that masqueraded as me control, but it wasn't me controlling. It was the lust for comfort that was in control, right? And for me, that lust for comfort showed up as food. So yeah, I think that's great. Okay, we are going to close the meeting. Stick around because we'll go through all that other stuff. And Cindy, you're next. Enjoy your after that, but we're going to go ahead and close the meeting right now. So together, if everybody will say the Serenity Prayer. Thank you so much, everybody, for coming. This has been really wonderful. Thank you.
Thanks for recovering with us.